Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. We're 5 years since the pandemic bit at its hardest point, and there's a repercussion that is only now being highlighted, and it's an expensive repercussion because its delay hasn't really been noticed until now, and it's because of a development delay. And it's actually going to cost a lot of money for local authorities to sort. The amount of children that have special educational needs, the SEND children, has rocketed upwards in numbers. This, of course, is a direct effect of what happened to them during lockdown. They weren't meeting friends. They weren't developing as per normal. That normal development stage that children go through at all ages has been knocked back. It's literally arrested development. You know, in the younger children, they're not mixing at the time. They weren't mixing with other children. They became very insular. For slightly older children, 8, 9, sort of 10, when they're starting to get their confidence in of themselves and making lasting friendships, that's been delayed. Older children going through puberty, having the ability to discuss it with people, that was delayed. And all at the same time and all at the same pace. And nobody noticed, not straight away. And here we are, 5 years later, and it's becoming apparent that this is now a major problem in schools. And schools have got to address it. Now, they do this several ways. There is the ability of bringing in specialist teachers who can understand the issues, that have a psychological background to their training. You can bring in multidisciplinary approaches. You can have negotiations with teachers, with parents, and with the LEA. Ultimately, the LEA can't really afford to do what they need to do. Specialist schools, in some cases, they haven't got the money. This is something that should have been seen at the time. Oh, wait, no, it was. At the time, people were saying this is going to arrest the development of children. This should be coming as no surprise. And yet, it is, because they haven't planned for it. The moment all this went down, there should have been provisions within local education authorities to deal with the problem would come down the line years later. And they haven't done that. And now it's coming home to roost. Some LEAs could actually be driven into insolvency over this problem. We're not talking a 2 or 3% rise. In some cases, it's 30 or 40%. And that's not the rise, that's the number of pupils. It's thousands of percentage in rise, but it's 30 to 40% of all pupils have some form of now educational need because of that arrested development 4 or 5 years ago. I've seen it with younger members of my extended family. I've got nieces that were very, very shy, incredibly shy at the time. Thankfully, they've shined. In this case, I think that is the correct participle. Anyway, they've come to fruition. They have gone through that. But there'll be some that don't have the support of larger families or whatever the problems are. Insufficient parenting, and I don't mean that as a reflection of the parents. Parents generally try to do the best they can. There's some awful parents, but generally parents try to do the best they can. But sometimes they just don't have the resources available. And you have to accept that. Now, the innocents in this, of course, are the children. They should not be blamed for decisions made on their behalf by people who were warned of the consequences. You know, the government, the likes of Boris. He was warned that this would happen, and yet he made no provision. You cannot take children who are at that peak developmental stages and do this to them and expect no result. It was hard on those of us who were old enough to know better. We'll never let it happen again, I think. We know now the consequences, especially for children. But, they were acting, but they were told they should have done it. Why haven't they? Now, these restrictions by a controlling central government have now resulted in probably an entire cohort of children that are going to be damaged, I think perhaps permanently, some of them permanently through their life, through a lack of social engagement, of confidence, of communicative abilities. They don't like speaking out in public. The shyness now of sort of the age group 5 to 10, maybe 12. I've noticed that they become incredibly shy. There's some loud gobshites, of course, because you always get the, the ones at the edge. But, a lot of them, they seem very shy and quiet and secluded children. This could be very damaging. We don't, necessarily we want children to be normal. We want the full range. And we're not getting it, is where I'm going with that. And the educational system does not have the ability to cope with it, doesn't have the resources and funds to cope with it. And I think in some cases doesn't even have an understanding of the problem. And it is a major problem. Now, what's the solution? Well, you can't expect LEAs to be able to deal with this. There must be central funding from government, and it's got to be significant. It can't just be a sticking plaster on an open wound. It's got to be lots and lots of funding. Get the specialist teachers in. Get the psychologists in. Talk to the children. Encourage them. Build their confidence. Make them aware. You can't force them into communicating with each other. Can't force them into social situations. But you've got to make them aware that these situations are important and try and encourage them, even in initially small groups, 2s and 3s. Talk, express what happened, express your fears and things like this. Try and normalise normality. Because for these children, what we would consider normal was abnormal because we're just going around and going back to normal. They've never had a normal to go back to. That weirdness became their normal. And so it's a major job. We've got millions upon millions of children, 10 million children that are in that bracket. Frightening when you say it like that, isn't it? 10 million children in that bracket. They all are going to have individual problems. That's why the schools can't cope. That's why now we have record truancy. It's not the children not wanting to go to school and learn. It's children not confident walking into situations like that, not able to deal with confrontation, not able to deal with large classrooms. They've never had it. The solution is cash, time, effort, people, and society. We've got to be aware that we do have a damaged generation, damaged by the likes of the politicians. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks very much. Goodbye.